You're watching Legal Focus on TVC News. Our advocate for this week is renowned senior advocate of Nigeria, Chief Robert Isaac Clarke. Good day, sir. And thank you very much for granting us this interview in your law firm.
Always my pleasure.
Let's go to the beginning, if you will. How you became a lawyer and what growing up was like for you.
I've always had the intention of becoming a lawyer, right from my school days. However, during our time, there were no scholarships to read law in the universities in Nigeria, and one has to rely on either going to England and do what you call fagburu, and then read through that period, or you study privately at home, do your rapid results college, as we call it then, and from there maybe get into the university. So I was handicapped financially because my dad died when I was only 4 months old, and he left behind for us, 4 of us, only a life insurance policy of £150 then, which was good money. So that saw us through our school life, but could not sustain us through the university period. So my elder brother, who was in a technical college and was to study engineering, I gave him the advantage that, well, he has to do a full-time course. I can still do on my part-time and look forward to the favor of any person.
Right. Okay, and then you became a lawyer. I noticed, or I gather, that you had a checkered education before you finally got your degree in law. Tell us about that period. It appears you were determined to be a lawyer by all costs.
By 1962, I had passed, as a private student, I had passed the intermediate examination of the London University in law. However, due to financial restraints, I couldn't carry on with that active private way of reading. I had an uncle then, Ladi Sulekolo, who was the High Commissioner in England, and also it came in through the time the Civil War was to come in. So he was able to get me a scholarship to study industrial relations. It's a 9-month course in Ruskin College in Oxford, and I was able to do a 9-month course. I came back to Nigeria in 1967, hoping to return to my trade union work and still read privately to become a lawyer. So I came back in 67, but by 1968, 69, I discovered that most of my colleagues in London were already lawyers and were coming back home. And I knew that I was better than them in class. I was doing, well. So I decided I had to go back and read law. And by the grace of God, because it was His grace, I was able to get a scholarship from the Nigerian Ports Authority.
And then let's have, what about your friends? What about your peers then, that were more or less significant in that period of your life?
Most of my classmates were already back in Nigeria.
Right.
Virtually all of them at that time. Most of them had qualified 4, 3, 5 years before that date. So I was in the midst of my classmates who were already lawyers, and I was being taunted by them, let's be honest about it. I had 2 rascal friends, Beko Ransom Kuti and Fela Anikula Kokuti, who were all my schoolmates and classmates, and Obateju Osho and others. And I also had the lawyers amongst them, late Shidi Shweton, Justice Ogun Odunawo, Shidi Shweton and Odusi. They were already lawyers practicing. And when I talk, and Ben Wesson,
you're not yet a lawyer.
Not a lawyer,
So tell us about practice. The journey of you becoming a senior advocate of Nigeria, or let's even look at your breakthrough moments by the time you now entered active practice.
Well, let me be honest. When I was going to the university, I was bonded by the Nigerian Ports Authority to at least serve them for 5 years. But there was a significant case. I was on leave in the Nigerian Ports Authority, and I decided, because we were not practicing in the courts then, 4 of us, just late Justice Katsina Alu, myself, and 2 others, and we were being taunted that, look, we are lawyers who can't go to court. So I decided on one of my vacation periods to attach myself to the prestigious chambers of Fani Kayode and Shwenumo on a vacation job. And I was privileged then to be counsel, to Chief Shobo Shwenumo in a very celebrated land case in the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, the family we won the case for advertised it in the Daily Times, and my chief legal officer, saw that I was practicing private practice. That was what he called it then. And I was so annoyed that you people say we don't go to court. I'm using my own time to go and gain experience, and you are still saying I was doing private practice. So that was the what made me to leave the Ports Authority into private practice, to join Fani Kayode and Shwenumo's chambers. Actually, I met late Chief Fani Kayode in a court representing Ports Authority, and I believe he was so impressed. And he called me, young man, come here, come here. Which chambers are you? I said, no, I'm in the Ports Authority. What are you doing there? Come to my chambers. And that was how I was plunged into prestigious chambers that were handling prestigious and high-flying cases.
And gained the needed experience.
And that is how, with my background as a trade unionist, because you can't compare me to a fresher from the law school, because I had attained, a stage in my life that I negotiate on behalf of my trade union before top management. So practicing law was not, like a new thing to me. And that's how I just plunged myself into it.
Wow. And rising through or learning all the things you had learned as a unionist, in private practice as well, under the chambers of Mr. Fani Kayode then. Tell us about other key cases you had now, where you had good moments or where you had bad moments.
When I was with Fani Kayode and Shwenumo, I had the opportunity to handle election petitions in 1978, 79. I knew I did what they called the Damaturu local government elections then, and the late executive president of Nigeria, Shehu Shagari, I was his lawyer then. And it was a case which, if I had not won then, would not have propelled some of the people there to want to contest election, like late Kam Salem, whom also I represented during the gubernatorial elections in 1979. So I had been pushed into a high-flying practice right in my younger days. So I saw that if I go out, I must maintain that standard. And by the grace of God, I've been able to maintain that standard.
But did you have any worst days? Are there days that you would tag as, this has to be the worst days in my career?
I wouldn't tag any day as the worst day. The worst thing that can happen to a lawyer is when you lose a case which you thought you were going to win. Then we had no problems about courts. And one is sure, if you do well, you will win your case. So I really cannot pinpoint a particular day where I was not happy. But let me say of this. I defended the late Ejibadero along with my senior partner, both from the Court of Appeal then in 1978, I think, or 77, 78, and the Supreme Court. So I was able, the day judgment was being delivered, I wept in court that day. That was the first sentimental case, I would have said, because I believed, and I still believe till today, that the man was not guilty.
This was a celebrated murder trial.
Murder. Right. I was his lawyer. I was being led by late Chief Shobo Shwenumo. And when the pronouncement was being made by the Supreme Court, I really wept. Because the man asked me, what are they saying? Because, and I said, I couldn't tell him. And I started crying. It was then in me that something was wrong.
Your kind of practice and advocacy has, I know I'm not speaking alone, I know this is not just one opinion, has enriched, legal jurisprudence and of course, the nation, Nigeria. But for you, what would you like to be remembered for as we end this interview?
You see, that instinct of a trading honest still reflects in my practice. I like to help those who have been oppressed. I like to fight for the rights of people. And the greatest case, I've done cases where the principles of law have been restated through my cases, either in the realm of receiver managership, either in the realm of government acquisitions. I have been able to make a mark in those areas. But one of the greatest cases that I still cherish today, which is now at the Supreme Court level, was the case of one of these judges. I am not saying people are corrupt or are not corrupt, but if there's a principle of law, because I didn't like the way judges were being handled. How can you go, a judge, and carry a judge from the chambers straight to the court to stand before another judge? I am not guilty, I'm guilty. And I felt it was wrong. That procedure was wrong. Because if you are going to be judged by your peers, which is what the Judicial Service Commission is for, if the doctors can be judged by their own peers, if the Bar Association can be, the judge in the rights of practicing lawyers, why should a judge not be tried first by his peers before you carry him, So I decided, and I think I represented about 4 or 5 judges. I've been able to, get them off except the present one I'm handling.
You're referring to the Justice Nganjuwa trial?
Danjua's trial.
Right.
And I was able to establish through that case that you just can't carry a judge straight from the chambers as a judge and straight to the dock on a criminal charge. And I'm so happy. And I know that case will stand the test of time for many years to come.
Chief Robert Clarke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, thank you so much for this interview.
It's always my pleasure.
And that's The Advocate. Legal Focus continues in a moment. Stay with us.